Dr. Dockery, thanks so much for spending a few minutes together today talking about Christian higher education, leadership, and the little series that you edit for Crossway. It's a real pleasure to sit down with you.
I'm honored to be with you.
Thank you. Let's start with just talking about Christian higher ed. How many years have you been involved in various capacities?
At least 3 decades.
And you've been involved with numerous different institutions. Tell us where you've served.
I began teaching at Crossway College in Dallas, Texas, teaching theology and New Testament. Served there for a little more than 4 years before I was invited to become a faculty member at Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. And we spent 7 years in Louisville as teaching in New Testament and theology, and I was invited to become a dean and chief academic officer the last 4 years that I was there. Then the last 18 plus, we were in Jackson, Tennessee, where I served as president at Union University. And this year, by the grace of God, we have been invited to come here with you in the Midwest. I currently serve as president at Trinity International University and Trinity Evangelical Divinity School.
And congratulations on your appointment. Had the opportunity to be at your inauguration earlier this year, and what a wonderful celebration of the past and also hope for the future.
Yes, we built the inauguration theme around heritage and hope with great gratitude for what God has done in the past, but equal hopefulness for the days ahead.
Well, I think that by God's grace, you're the right man for the right job, and so thankful that you're there.
Thank you.
So with your decades of experience, numerous institutions, and various capacities of Christian higher education, how have you seen Christian higher ed change over these decades?
Well, I think it has become, has greater breadth than it has ever had. Christian higher education, as you know, goes back to the founding of private higher education in this country, the founding of Harvard in 1636, with their motto right there in the heart of what they were trying to do, Veritas pro Christo et Ecclesia, truth for Christ and his church. And every institution started thereafter for many years was started with the idea of serving the church and advancing the kingdom of God. But in recent years, particularly after World War I, after the public-private divide became so obvious in this country and so much money was funneled into public institutions, and as Christian institutions tended to become untethered to their past, to their mission, it has become more necessary for Christian institutions to become quite purposeful and intentional about what they were doing. And many of those were started as Bible colleges, particularly after the fundamentalist modernist controversy, and others with a focus on the liberal arts. But now you see Christian institutions serving the whole gamut of higher education, doing business and education and healthcare and all across the board. It's pretty exciting to see people take seriously the claim of Jesus Christ on all areas of learning, all knowledge, all wisdom, recognizing it having its source in God.
And I know you're a student of history and a student of history of higher education in particular, as you just alluded to. What are some of the reasons that institutions have drifted away from those original mission statements that they had?
Yeah.
What lessons are there for us today?
I think without exception that when an institution begins to separate itself from its relationship to the churches, you see things start to become quite different. I don't think everything that James Burchell wrote in his important work on the dying of the light is right. I think some of the aspects of the argument probably are off track, but the overall thesis is right on target. That the minute an institution begins to distance itself from the churches, it begins to lose its theological direction. And once it loses its theological direction, it's very hard to recover.
So when you think about Christian higher ed today, what would you say is the state of the union? I mean, maybe we could talk in terms of strengths and weaknesses on one hand, and then opportunities and threats you see in the future?
That's one of the great strengths is the growing number of institutions choosing to work together. So you look at an organization like the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, which now has 115 members in this country and well over 100 affiliate members around the globe. Institutions coming together, committed to an intentional Christ-centered mission and finding ways to cooperate, collaborate, share resources and ideas. That is a very exciting project. You turn the clock back to the 1970s, just 40 years ago. That organization started with less than 20 members. And so to see it now at this place, 200 institutions around the globe, that's quite encouraging. So I would say that's the strongest piece for all of us to look at. It helps everyone realize when they're working very hard, they're not in this alone. You can find colleagues, co-laborers to come alongside, people from whom you can learn, and that's a very encouraging marker.
And what do you see are some of the threats to Christian higher education today?
Yeah, I think the challenge continues that has been there for well over 300 years. Christian higher education intentionally lives in two different worlds, the church and the academy. And there's always a pull from the academy to raise questions that might cause an institution to lose its balance or to lose its direction. Unfortunately, the story can be told over and over again of how that has happened. And institutions today are not, don't have any kind of defense against that other than their commitment to their own mission.
If you could sit down with potential donors at Trinity, potential parents, potential students, what's your summary pitch for why they should consider Christian higher ed, knowing that it's going to be oftentimes more expensive as an option? Why is it so important in your view?
Well, we want to first and foremost recognize that we are a strong academic institution. We want parents and students to recognize our commitment to rigorous academics, to engaging the issues of the day, to understanding the great ideas of history, and that they'll be as well prepared coming from our institutions as they will from any others. Secondly, the education that they would get at an institution like Trinity is that the institution is coherent, because we recognize that all knowledge finds its source in God, and therefore even the different disciplines somehow have a relationship, all under the lordship of Jesus Christ. And so everybody's working together around a shared mission, a coherent understanding of education. Thirdly, there's the value-added understanding of learning how to think not only critically, which is what every institution of higher education wants students to learn to do, but to learn to think creatively and, most importantly, to think Christianly, or as T.S. Eliot was so fond of saying, to learn to think in Christian categories about life. And I think that's what we want parents and students to understand. And then lastly, one of the things that happens at an institution like Trinity or other Christian higher education institutions is there's a very special sense of community. Even as people come from all over this country, all around the world. At Trinity, we have students from 46 countries and 48 states, so there's great geographical breadth. But nevertheless, there's this wonderful sense of community because we share in common life in Christ. And that creates a sense of spiritual maturity. So on the other side, it's not just that someone has mastered certain content in courses, but they become spiritually mature, whole people. Our goal is for people to graduate becoming almost living out Luke 2:52. So they're people who have increased in wisdom and stature and favor with God and with others. And when that happens, it's a very different kind of education. It's not just a mastery of one subject matter, but it's an education for life.
That is a good segue, I think, to the series that you are editing that's ongoing for Crossway. Reclaiming the Christian Intellectual Tradition is the name of the series. And you wrote the lead volume in here, The Great Tradition of Christian Thinking, a Student's Guide, co-authored with Timothy George down at Beeson. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by reclaiming the Christian intellectual tradition and a little bit about the series in general.
I think one of the challenges that institutions have in the 21st century is figuring out how to get a foothold to make a case for a Christian understanding of certain issues. And for many people, they're trying to reinvent the wheel, starting all over. What we're trying to say in this series is that we really don't have to do that, is that for 2,000 years, some of the great thinkers, some of the great minds in the history of the church have helped us understand how to address some of the topics that are still challenges for us today. They may have a little different dress than what they had in the 2nd century or the 5th century or the 16th century, but nevertheless, we can learn from those thinkers. And so what we're trying to do is to reclaim the best of Christian thinking through the ages, looking at Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Luther, Calvin, Edwards, C.S. Lewis, and see what they have to say to us today, because we have much to learn from them. If we can stand on their shoulders, then we can see much further down the field, and we have a great foundation on which to stand. So we're trying to introduce students and parents and faculty and staff to this wonderful tradition, and to show how it has shaped literature, music, the arts, philosophy, the sciences, the social sciences, every sphere in which we are carrying out education on our campuses.
So I won't go through and read all of the titles here, but just to mention a few. The liberal arts, literature, philosophy, political thought, psychology, art and music. How do you envision these specifically being used? They're slim volumes written by leading experts in the field, but who's going to pick this up? How's it going to be used in your view?
Yeah. Each volume is 128 pages. They're all the same size. They're intended to be very accessible, very readable, geared for freshman and sophomore students to try to understand what higher education is all about. Whether it's a first-generation college student whose parents or no one in their family has paved the way for them, or they're a legacy, 4th or 5th generation, even going to the same school. Very often for freshmen and sophomores, it's pretty difficult to navigate their way, figuring out what higher education is all about. It's very different than their previous educational experiences. And so what this does is, when people use terminology like the liberal arts, this introduces them and tells them what we mean by that language, what's involved in the liberal arts, why is it important, how does it help us think holistically about life. For those who are searching for majors, not quite sure whether they want to do literature or philosophy or music or the arts, these books give us an insight into what takes place in that subject matter. So for the new student, these volumes, I think, can be a great introduction to various subjects and say, this is the way that this door is opened for you. On the other hand, for donors who don't know much about Christian higher education, why is this different than the University of with their favorite football team? Then they understand what we're trying to do that's distinctive. And for faculty who have been mentored, educated in secular institutions. They are Christians, they've been to church every Sunday, but their education is totally secular. This is at least an introduction to say, here is something different about what we're trying to do. It's more than a value-added piety. It's a different way of thinking. And so I think it can serve a variety of constituencies, and we have found so far it's welcomed in all of those areas.
That's wonderful. I think that you are known in various capacities. I mean, obviously, you've been a university president. So as an educator, also as a scholar, as a New Testament scholar, as a theologian. But when I hear the name David Dockery, one of the first things that comes to mind is gift of leadership and a vision of leadership. I know a doctoral dissertation was really recently written on you and your leadership, and Brahman and Holman has just published this new Festschrift in honor of you, Convictional Civility, Engaging the Culture in the 21st Century, Essays in honor of David S. Dockery. There are a lot of young people, a lot of pastors, a lot of older people who are wanting to become better leaders, more gifted leaders, more effective leaders. If you could sit down with somebody who is on the younger end, whether they're still in school or out of school, whether they're a pastor or not a pastor, what are the main things that you would want to convey to them about the gift and responsibility and stewardship of leadership?
First and foremost is that leadership is a call to service, not a call to a position. I think people get that easily confused. Leadership is a way of enabling others to carry out the roles to which they've been called, the gifts to which they have been given. And so what you want to do as a leader is to help others, to empower them, and to see them develop and be able to flourish in their calling within the kingdom of God. So I'd say first and foremost is to help people understand leadership is service, not a position. Secondly, to recognize that leadership is very hard work, and that if you want to do it, then it's going to be long hours and multiple tasks and different responsibilities that rest upon you, and help people understand the sense of responsibility that comes with leadership. Thirdly, I think, is to encourage those who want to move in that direction to find a mentor, someone who will help them think about what leadership is all about, how leadership may differ in a church or a parachurch organization or a publishing house like this, or a place of Christian higher education, or on the mission field. They all would have a lot of commonalities, but there would be some nuances of distinction across that. So I think finding the right mentor, I was very blessed, and I recognize that. I'm one of those turtles on a fence post. There's no way I could have gotten up there by myself. A lot of people have helped me along the way and given their time and shaped me. I'm very thankful for people like Carl Henry and Chuck Colson and others who spent a lot of time with me to help me learn how to think and evaluate my own giftedness and where I could best be used. And so I would encourage people to find a mentor. It really does make a difference. And then fourthly, just to trust the Lord to open the right place and right position. I see so many people say, I want to be this, and they become too ambitious. There's a place for godly ambition. It's a great title of John Stott's biography. There's a place for godly ambition, but sometimes people get a little too aggressive in trying to find a place. And I would say just wait for the Lord to open the door and put you in the right place where your experience and giftedness matches the need of an institution, an organization, or the people of God in that place. I think those would be the first four things I would want people to understand, and then to realize that there is not one way to lead. Leaders are very different. Some are introverted, more extroverted. Some lead by example. Some lead by their speaking abilities. So you have to find the right way for your personality and your gifts to merge into the leadership situation to which you've been called.